There is a question every lender in this country asks about you before they ever say yes, and it is not the question you think it is. It is not how much you make. It is not your job title. It is not even your credit score. Not really. The real question, underneath all of it, is simpler and colder than that. What do you have that we can take from you if you stop paying? That is the whole system. That is the entire machine boiled down to one sentence. And once you understand that question, you start to understand something that should terrify you a little. The man with nothing pledged, nothing pawned, nothing tied up as security for anyone, is not a man the system loves. He is a man the system cannot reach. And a system that cannot reach you is a system that has already started treating you like a threat. Let me tell you about a man named Ellison. Ellison is 61 years old. He spent 34 years running heavy equipment for a mid-sized construction outfit, the kind of company that never made headlines and never went under. He paid off his truck in 2014 and never financed another vehicle again. He paid off his house 4 years ago, mailed in the last check himself instead of doing it online because he wanted to feel the envelope leave his hand. He carries one debit card, no credit cards, no mortgage, no car note, no lease, no lien on anything he owns. For 30 years, every single financial decision Ellison made was built around one goal, and one goal only. Never owe anybody anything he could not pay off by Friday. 2 years ago, Ellison's company sent him out of state for an 8-month contract. He needed to rent a small apartment near the job site. Simple, routine, the kind of thing that should take an afternoon. He was denied. Not because he had bad credit. He had no credit, which is not the same thing, but the system does not know the difference and does not care to learn it. A man with a defaulted loan and a man with no loan history at all get filtered through the exact same algorithm, and that algorithm was never built to recognize freedom. It was built to recognize leverage. Ellison had none. No open trade lines, no revolving balance, nothing the property management company's screening software could grab onto and price a risk against. To a machine trained entirely on debt, a man who owes nothing looks exactly like a man who is invisible. And invisible, to that machine, reads as dangerous. Sit with that for a second, because this is the part that should bother you. The man who spent 3 decades making sure no one could ever repossess anything from him, the man who did everything you were told to do, was treated like a liability. Meanwhile, somewhere in that same city, a man carrying $60,000 in revolving credit card debt, a man drowning in minimum payments, a man who is one missed paycheck away from collapse, was approved for the exact same apartment that same afternoon. Approved because he was leveraged. Approved because the bank, the landlord, the entire system had something they could hold over him if he ever stepped out of line. That is not an accident. That is the design. You have been taught your whole life that debt is risk and paying cash is safety. And for you, personally, sitting at your kitchen table doing the math on your own life, that is true. But you were never the one the system was optimizing for. The system was optimizing for control. And a man with no debt is a man with no leash. He cannot be threatened with repossession because there is nothing left to repossess. He cannot be threatened with a rate hike because there is no loan to reprice. He cannot be squeezed on a monthly payment because there is no monthly payment to squeeze. He answers to no collateral because he has offered none. And a man who answers to no collateral is, by definition, a man the system has no leverage over. Ellison did not get denied that apartment because something was wrong with him. He got denied because, for one afternoon, in one small database, he became ungovernable. And ungovernable men make bad customers. To understand how deliberately this machine was built, you have to go back to a specific year in a specific place and watch it break. 2008. Stockton, California. A city that, on paper, should have been a quiet success story. Home values had tripled in under a decade. Ordinary men, forklift drivers, mid-level managers, men not unlike you, had watched the equity in their houses climb so fast that banks started calling them, not the other way around, offering home equity lines of credit against paper gains that had not even been earned yet, just projected. A man named Raymond Ochoa, a warehouse supervisor who had bought his house in 1998 for $140,000, watched its appraised value climb past $380,000 by 2006. The bank did not wait for him to ask. They offered him a line of credit against that new number, framed it as simply unlocking money that was already his. He used part of it for his daughter's tuition, part of it for a used truck, part of it just sitting there as a cushion, because for the first time in his working life, he felt like the house had made him wealthy instead of the other way around. Here's what nobody explained to Raymond, and what nobody is explaining to you right now about your own version of this. That equity was never actually his. It was collateral. It was a number the bank had agreed to trust, conditionally, as long as the market kept climbing, and as long as Raymond kept making payments on time. The moment either of those two things failed, the arrangement was never going to protect him. It was going to protect the lender. And in the fall of 2008, when the market did not just slow down but collapsed, banks across the country did something that felt to millions of homeowners like a betrayal, but was in fact exactly what the contract had always allowed them to do from the very beginning. They froze the credit lines. Overnight, Raymond logged in one morning to find that the cushion he had counted on for emergencies simply did not exist anymore. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because the collateral underneath it had lost value, and a lender only extends trust as far as the collateral extends value. Within 18 months, homes across that same neighborhood in Stockton were foreclosing at a rate that made national news. And the men losing those houses were not reckless men. They were men who had trusted a system that had convinced them equity was the same thing as ownership. It never was. Equity was always just the size of the leash. The bigger the equity, the more comfortable the leash felt, right up until the moment it tightened. This is what you need to hear, sitting where you are right now, however many years removed from 2008. The mechanism is identical today. Only the names have changed. It is not called a home equity line anymore in every conversation. Sometimes it is a cash-out refinance. Sometimes it is a car loan against a paid-off vehicle you were told to leverage for a better interest rate. Sometimes it is simply the pressure, quiet and constant, to stop sitting on equity and start using it, because a man who is not using his collateral is, from the system's point of view, a man who is wasting an opportunity to be controlled a little more efficiently. Every single time you are offered money against something you already own outright, you are being offered a leash disguised as a convenience, and every single time you decline it, you are doing the one thing the machine was never built to handle. You are staying invisible to it. Now, let me show you how the machine actually works underneath. Because once you see the mechanics, you cannot unsee them. Think of the entire lending system as a warehouse, and every loan as a box sitting on a shelf. The bank does not actually want the box to sit there quietly and get paid off on schedule. That is the least profitable outcome for them. What the bank wants is for that box to generate interest for as many months as possible, ideally with the minimum payment structured so that most of what you send in covers interest first and principal second, so the box stays on the shelf longer, earning more, before it is ever actually paid down. Your mortgage, your car note, your credit card balance, they were never designed to be paid off quickly. They were engineered to be serviced slowly. A 30-year mortgage is not a favor. It is a 30-year subscription, and the fine print was written entirely by the company charging the subscription fee. This is not a conspiracy. Nobody is meeting in a back room laughing about it. It is just engineering. Somebody, decades ago, ran the numbers on human behavior and discovered that most people, when offered a lower monthly payment stretched over more years, will take it every single time because the human brain is built to solve for this month's pressure, not next decade's total cost. The system did not have to trick you. It just had to understand you better than you understood yourself and price accordingly. Let me tell you about a second man, because Ellison's story alone might look like bad luck. It is not bad luck. It is the design, and you need to see it from a different angle to believe that. His name was Devlin. He worked 26 years in middle management for a regional distribution company, the kind of career that used to guarantee something and quietly stopped guaranteeing anything sometime around 2009. Devlin did the opposite of what Ellison did. He trusted the institutions. He financed a newer car every 5 years because his advisor told him it was smarter than paying cash and losing liquidity. He carried a moderate credit card balance on purpose because he had been told by people who sounded confident that a little debt, managed responsibly, built a stronger credit profile than none at all. He refinanced his mortgage twice to pull equity for renovations. And once, for a business investment, a colleague brought to him that fell apart within a year. For most of his working life, Devlin's system looked like it was working. His credit score was excellent. Lenders competed for his business. He felt, in a way Ellison never quite let himself feel, financially sophisticated. And then, in his late 50s, his company went through a restructuring, the kind that eliminates a role rather than a person, which is a distinction that matters legally, and means nothing to the man standing in the parking lot with a cardboard box. Devlin's severance covered 4 months. His monthly obligations, the car, the revolving balance, the refinanced mortgage, did not pause for even one day to accommodate his unemployment. Within a year, Devlin was not behind because he had been careless. He was behind because the entire structure he had been told was sophisticated was, in fact, a structure with no slack built into it whatsoever. Every dollar of income had already been claimed by something before it ever reached his hands. Ellison and Devlin never met. They never will. But look at what happened to both of them, side by side, and you start to see the actual shape of the trap. Ellison, debt-free, was treated as invisible and suspicious by a system that had no leverage over him. Devlin, leveraged and cooperative, was treated as valuable right up until the moment his income stopped, and then the exact same leverage that had made him a good customer for 20 years became the mechanism that broke him in 18 months. Neither man's outcome was random. Both outcomes were the system functioning exactly as it was built to function. It rewards leverage until leverage becomes convenient to weaponize, and it punishes freedom because freedom cannot be weaponized at all. Here is the part that should make you angry. You were never given an honest choice between these two paths. You were handed a script early in your working life, a script that said good credit is virtue, that said leverage is sophistication, that said a paid-off house sitting there quietly is wasted opportunity. Nobody sat you down and told you that every one of those instructions benefited the institution, handing them out far more than it ever benefited you. Nobody told you that the entire architecture of modern personal finance, the credit score, the revolving balance, the refinance offer that arrives right when your equity crosses a certain threshold, was built by people whose actual business model depends on you never fully paying anything off. And here is the part that reframes everything you have heard up to this point. Ask yourself, why a certain kind of man, one who's not loud, not flashy, not performing wealth for anyone in the room, still commands something when he walks in? You have met him. Maybe you have tried to become him. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. People read him as steady before he says a single word. For years, you might have assumed that was some kind of charm, some social gift certain men are simply born with. It is not charm, it is math. A man who owes nothing to anyone needs nothing from anyone, and a room can always tell the difference between a man performing confidence and a man who genuinely has nothing to lose in that conversation. The posture is not the cause. The posture is the symptom. Financial sovereignty produces social authority as a side effect every single time, because a man with no leverage held over him has nothing left to perform. That is the real trade you have been offered your whole life, whether anyone ever said it out loud to you or not. Comfortable monthly payments in exchange for a leash, immediate purchasing power in exchange for permanent leverage sitting somewhere on a ledger you will never see. And the system needed you to believe the leash was a benefit. It needed you to call it a credit line, a pre-approval, a rewards program, anything except what it actually was, which was a mechanism for making sure that when the moment came to squeeze, there would be something to squeeze. So here is the question underneath everything you have just heard, and it is not a financial question, not really. It is a question about who you are willing to be for the rest of your life. Are you a man with collateral sitting out there somewhere, waiting for the day the terms quietly change on you? Or are you a man who has made himself unreachable, who has nothing sitting on anyone's shelf, who cannot be squeezed because there is nothing left to squeeze? Ellison's denied apartment application was not a defeat. It was proof. Proof that, for one afternoon, in one database, a man who owed nothing had become completely unreadable to a machine built entirely around reading debt. That is not a flaw in Ellison. That is the highest compliment the system is capable of paying, even though it will never say so, even though it will keep calling him a risk for the rest of his life. You do not need a system's approval to be free of it. You need the opposite. You need to become the kind of man the system cannot price, cannot leverage, cannot threaten with anything real, because there is nothing of yours left in its hands. Own nothing they can seize. Owe nothing they can call. Fear nothing they can threaten. That is not poverty. That is the furthest thing from it. That is the one financial position this entire machine was never built to handle. The door was never locked. You just spent 30 years being told it was safer not to try it.